Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Thursday, April 15th. This would have been tax day, but that got pushed back to May 17th, so that's good. A little bit of a breather. All right, today was a really interesting day. I want to talk about this because, let me just say this. For anybody out there who has been skeptical of the power of fiscal, the power of fiscal support, I mean, this has got to completely eradicate that from your view, or I would say that person, whoever that is just being purely ideological. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. We saw in March retail sales jump by the most ever. Okay, up, I think it was like 48 billion in 1 month. The percent change from last year, also an all-time historic record. As a matter of fact, if you look at a graphic of that, it is like unbelievable, just a straight line up. An increase of almost 30% year over year. And I actually posted the graphic on my Facebook page and also on my Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I'm Twitter/Mike Norman, and Facebook, just Google me, Mike Norman. So I posted those graphics on both of those places. Where did that come from? It came from the stimulus money. It came from the stimulus checks. Now, the stimulus should open up your eyes to two things. And by the way, right now the estimates for first quarter GDP growth in this country is running around 8.3%. I mean, you have to go back basically to the 1960s to see something like that, I believe. This ought to open up your eyes to two things. It definitely opened up my eyes to at least it corroborated something that I believed for a long time, which was in the last 40 years, when really nearly all of the fiscal we ever did over the last 40 years was targeted towards wealthy people and corporate profits, the so-called, trickle down BS garbage. Over that period of time, we have rarely, if ever, seen U.S. economic growth exceed 3% annually. I mean, 3% was like a target. I remember Trump saying, hey, we're going to hit 3%. Yeah, 3%. And now we're growing almost at 8%. And by the way, if you've been listening to me over the past couple of months, I was saying we're going to get like China level growth, like 6.5 to 7. We're blowing that away. We are blowing that away. So number one, and I think a lot of you are going to agree with me on this, and a lot of you probably already knew this, and maybe were, griping about it as much as I was for a long time, that the trickle-down economics of Reagan, and, that's been carried along from Reagan to Bush 1 to Clinton to Bush 2 to Obama to even Trump. That's garbage. All that does is put money in the hands of super wealthy people and corporate profits, and it keeps economic growth down. Very muted. But what happens when you give regular working people money? We're seeing this right now. And this is just a teeny slice of what proper fiscal can do. Because let's face it, it was like a one-time thing. They gave people checks, where over the course of the last 40 years, think about it. If the financial support, rather than going to the upper income echelon and corporate profits solely, had gone to working people, the economy could have been like unbelievable and growing at these levels for sustained periods of time. without the need for financialization, without seeing these very disruptive financial bubbles and economic crashes. That's number one. Shifted away, if it was shifted away from funneling more and more, we'd be getting rid of so much, or we would not have had all this income and wealth inequality. That's number one. Number two, the economy would have been completely transformed if the fiscal was also directed at making national investments that we need. In other words, infrastructure, health care, basic science and research, environment, clean energy, this sort of stuff. If that was happening, I mean, you could almost talk about a kind of a utopian situation. But this is clear evidence. And if you choose not to see this, and that's the operative word, choose. If you choose not to see this, or if you choose to deny this, or if you choose to somehow reframe this as being, this is no good, then you're a pure ideologue. And no matter what I tell you, or no matter what evidence there is to show that this is, true, and this is fact, and this is reality, then you're just gonna ignore it, or you're gonna come up with some rationale, rationalize it away. But it's clear, 8.5% growth in the first quarter, because the government finally shifted its fiscal policy to regular people. And don't forget, this was, this fiscal stimulus, and I know a lot of you may be already saying this, screaming at this video as I'm saying this. You're saying, Mike, we hardly got anything. The wealthy still got most of it. And you're right. I would agree with you. So as incomplete as this was, as limited as this was, you could still see the power and the effect from this. I mean, this shines a light on what is possible. We don't know if it's gonna shift policy finally in a different direction, away from this idiotic, and you get these jerks like, every time I see this guy, Art Laffer, they still roll this guy out on TV shows talking about this ridiculous, and he's been on record so many times over the last year saying fiscal stimulus doesn't work, where his whole theory, his whole thesis with the trickle down, that is fiscal stimulus. Don't forget, and I've said this so many times, tax cuts are the fiscal equivalent of spending increases. You cut taxes for the very rich, you cut taxes for them, and that is functionally like writing checks, like the government sending them checks. So there you have it. You cannot be against this or refute this or try to reframe this in any way without being an ideologue, which means you're just like, you're always going to see this in a way that you want to see it, which is against the reality of what it is. And nothing else is going to convince you. But that's fine. There's always going to be those people out there. But the facts are the facts. The numbers are the numbers. 8.5% GDP growth for the first quarter. And by the way, like I've been saying, the contrarian trade here is to belong the stock market. Because corporate profits are going to blow through the roof. And you were already seeing that with the bank earnings, the first slate of earnings that have come in. I mean, it's been like unbelievable. So, I mean, everyone who's talking about bubble this and baked in and this and that, I mean, it's not. Yesterday I talked about, you fill up the pool. As long as you don't drain that water out, that water's still in there, doing its thing. Now, maybe you're not, adding and adding and adding, unfortunately. But think about it. If that Biden infrastructure plan happens. I mean, the sky's the limit on what we're talking about here. I mean, that is so needed and necessary. Those are the kind of national investments we need. And we've needed for a long time. But instead of doing that, we did this stuff, funneling all the wealth to the top, financializing everything, creating a risky system that is prone to these, panics and busts, that needs to be bailed out all the time, not a robust, strong, resilient, underpinning of growth that is sustainable. So there you have it, man. I mean, you don't need to see anything more than that retail sales number today. That was unbelievable. And by the way, bond yields came down. And what have I been saying? Growth does not equate to inflation. Thank you very much. Anyway, go to my website, pitbulleconomics.com. Sign up for a 30-day free trial of MMT Trader. See everybody tomorrow. Bye.